There is a deep need in the world just now for guidance, almost any sort of spiritual guidance. 12 experts gathered in one room equal one big idiot. Thanks to the acuteness of his mind, he saw through the poverty of philosophical and Gnostic knowledge, and contemptuously rejected it. The unconscious is the unwritten history of mankind from time unrecorded. The debt we owe to the play of imagination is incalculable. Modern man is battered by the fundamental forces of his own psyche. The mind has grown to its present state of consciousness as an acorn grows into an oak, or as saurians developed into mammals. Nobody doubts the importance of conscious experience. Why then should we doubt the significance of unconscious happenings? They also are part of our life, and sometimes more truly a part of it for weal or woe than any happenings of the day. Creative powers can just as easily turn out to be destructive. It rests solely with the moral personality whether they apply themselves to good things or to bad. And if this is lacking, no teacher can supply it or take its place. I think that one should view with philosophic admiration the strange paths of the libido and should investigate the purposes of its circuitous ways. However far-fetched it may sound, experience shows that many neuroses are caused by the fact that people blind themselves to their own religious promptings because of a childish passion for rational enlightenment. Only a few individuals succeed in throwing off mythology in a time of a certain intellectual supremacy. The mass never frees itself. Special knowledge is a terrible disadvantage. Our intellect has achieved the most tremendous things, but in the meantime our spiritual dwelling has fallen into disrepair. The dream arises from a part of the mind unknown to us, but none the less important, and is concerned with the desires for the approaching day. In my case, Pilgrim's Progress consisted in my having to climb down 1,000 ladders until I could reach out my hand to the little clod of earth that I am. Colors express the main psychic functions of man. Language, in its origin and essence, is simply a system of signs or symbols that denote real occurrences or their echo in the human soul. You can take away a man's gods, but only to give him others in return. I have always said to my pupils, learn as much as you can about symbolism, then forget it when you are analyzing a dream. The starry vault of heaven is in truth the open book of cosmic projection. Dream the dream onward. The brain is viewed as an appendage of the genital glands. Whatever is not conscious will be experienced as fate. Becoming conscious is of course a sacrilege against nature. It is as though you had robbed the unconscious of something. About a third of my cases are suffering from no clinically definable neurosis, but from the senselessness and emptiness of their lives. This can be defined as the general neurosis of our times. A book of mine is always a matter of fate. There is something unpredictable about the process of writing, and I cannot prescribe for myself any predetermined course. In such doubtful matters, where you have to work as a pioneer, you must be able to put some trust in your intuition and follow your feeling even at the risk of going wrong. Creativity is the art that can give rise to visionary metaphorical relationships, as opposed to purely psychological ones. The psyche is a natural phenomenon. All aspects of the psyche, even those which seem pathological or destructive, actually serve the function of furthering our psychological development. The conscious mind allows itself to be trained like a parrot, but the unconscious does not, which is why St. Augustine thanked God for not making him responsible for his dreams. But India did not pass me by without a trace, it left tracks which lead me from one infinity to another infinity. No matter what the world thinks about religious experience, the one who has it possesses a great treasure, a thing that has become for him a source of life, meaning, and beauty, and that has given a new splendor to the world and to mankind. Even a lie is a psychic fact. It is a moral achievement on the part of the doctor who ought not to let himself be repelled by sickness and corruption. Mind and matter are two different aspects of one and the same thing. We often dream about people from whom we receive a letter by the next post. I have ascertained on several occasions that at the moment when the dream occurred the letter was already lying in the post office of the addressee. One is forced to speak not of what is held in common between the cultures, but what is held in common between the myths, and that in its simplest archetypal forms. What happens in the life of Christ happens always and everywhere. In the Christian archetype all lives of this kind are prefigured. God has fallen out of containment in religion and into human hearts, God is incarnating. Our whole unconscious is in an uproar from the God who wants to know and to be known. The wrong we have done, thought, or intended will wreak its vengeance on our souls. Psychological type is nothing static, it changes in the course of life. When religion stops talking about animals it will be all downhill. It seems as if it is only through an experience of symbolic reality that man, vainly seeking his own existence and making a philosophy out of it, can find his way back to a world in which he is no longer a stranger. Plato's world of ideas is beautiful. Imagination is a concentrated extract of all the forces of life. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. The more one sees of human fate and the more one examines its secret springs of action, the more one is impressed by the strength of unconscious motives and by the limitations of free choice. Whoever is afraid must needs be dependent, a weak thing needs support. That is why the primitive mind, from deep psychological necessity, begot religious instruction and embodied it in a magician or a priest. The unsatisfied yearning of the artist reaches back to the primordial image in the unconscious which is best fitted to compensate the inadequacy and one-sidedness of the present. For, in order to turn the individual into a function of the state, his dependence on anything beside the state must be taken from him. Only in our creative acts do we step forth into the light and see ourselves whole and complete. If you should see people in a room, you would not think that you had made those people, or that you were responsible for them. The individual disposition is already a factor in childhood, it is innate, and not acquired in the course of a life. Doesn't the world bring forth thinking in human heads with the same necessity that it brings forth blossoms on the plant? Creative power is mightier than its possessor. I have always been impressed by the fact that there are a surprising number of individuals who never use their minds if they can avoid it, and an equal number who do use their minds, but in an amazingly stupid way. Too much of the animal disfigures the civilized human being, too much culture makes a sick animal. When you walk with naked feet, how can you ever forget the earth? Fortunately, in her kindness and patience, nature has never put the fatal question as to the meaning of their lives into the mouths of most people. And where no one asks, no one needs to answer. If you are unhappy, you are too high up in your mind. Ultimate truth, if there be such a thing, demands the concert of many voices. Gnosticism was stamped out completely, and its remnants are so badly mangled that special study is needed to get any insight at all into its inner meaning. Whenever we give up, leave behind, and forget too much, there is always the danger that the things we have neglected will return with added force. Yoga in Mayfair or Fifth Avenue, or in any other place which is on the telephone, is a spiritual fake. When one is not understood, one should as a rule lower one's voice, because when one really speaks loudly enough and is not heard, it is because people do not want to hear. One had better begin to mutter to oneself, then they get curious. Art is a kind of innate drive that seizes a human being and makes him its instrument. One cannot free oneself by bowing to the yoke, but by breaking it. The more veiled becomes the outside world, steadily losing in color, tone, and passions, the more urgently the inner world calls us. The secret of artistic creation and the effectiveness of art is to be found in a return to the state of participation mystique, to that level of experience at which it is man who lives, and not the individual. Our whole educational problem suffers from a one-sided approach to the child who is to be educated, and from an equally one-sided lack of emphasis on the uneducatedness of the educator. All the works of man have their origin in creative fantasy. What right have we then to depreciate imagination? Science is the tool of the Western mind, and with it more doors can be opened than with bare hands. Hitler's movement is near to Mohammedanism. Only a life lived in a certain spirit is worth living. It is a remarkable fact that a life lived entirely from the ego is dull not only for the person himself but for all concerned. A collection of 100 great brains makes one big fat head. I believe that we have no real access to who we really are except in God. Only when we rest in God can we find the safety, the spaciousness, and the scary freedom to be who we are, all that we are, more than we are, and less than we are. The afternoon of a human life must have a significance of its own, and cannot be merely a pitiful appendage to life's morning. I have treated many hundreds of patients. Among those in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. Continuous creation is to be thought of not only as a series of successive acts of creation, but also as the eternal presence of the one creative act. Our heart glows, and secret unrest gnaws at the root of our being. Dealing with the unconscious has become a question of life for us. All my writings may be considered tasks imposed from within, their source was a fateful compulsion. What I wrote were things that assailed me from within myself. I permitted the spirit that moved me to speak out. From the middle of life onward, only he remains vitally alive who is ready to die with life. I am the triple owner of the world, the finest Turkey, the Lorelei, Germania, and Helvetia of exclusively sweet butter and Naples, and I must supply the whole world with macaroni. The wine of youth does not always clear with advancing years, sometimes it grows turbid. How difficult it is to reach anything approaching a moderate and relatively calm point of view in the midst of one's emotions. The angels are a strange genus, they are precisely what they are and cannot be anything else. They are themselves soulless beings who represent nothing but the thoughts and intuitions of their Lord. His retreat into himself is not a final renunciation of the world, but a search for quietude, where alone it is possible for him to make his contribution to the life of the community. Saint Thomas is really a great man quite apart from his saintliness. I want to be freed neither from human beings, nor from myself, nor from nature, for all these appear to me the greatest of miracles. There was need of a fantastic, indestructible optimism, and one far removed from all sense of reality, in order, for example, to discover in the shameful death of Christ really the highest salvation and the redemption of the world. During my medical education at the University of Bâle I found vivisection horrible, barbarous and above all unnecessary. Wherever an inferiority complex exists, there is a good reason for it. One of the most difficult tasks men can perform, however much others may despise it, is the invention of good games. Hitler is a medicine man type of leader. I have frequently seen people become neurotic when they content themselves with inadequate or wrong answers to the questions of life. An understanding heart is everything in a teacher, and cannot be esteemed highly enough. Nobody, as long as he moves about among the chaotic currents of life, is without trouble. Hitler's unconscious seems to be female. Hitler is a shy and friendly man with artistic tastes and gifts.